endeavors. We believe that every move should be a moving experience. Every week, my co-host Melissa Wallace and I will provide you with my team's unique marketing approach to selling homes and share with you our expertise in navigating the home buying process. We value the experience of our agents at Boston Connect Real Estate so much that not only will you hear my perspective on real estate topics, occasionally you will hear the expert thoughts and opinions of our experienced agents at Boston Connect Real Estate. Be a part of our roundtable. If you have any questions during the show, please call 781-837-4900. We love to talk real estate. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you like to listen to podcasts at Talk Real Estate Roundtable. If you would like a one-on-one consultation with me and my team to discuss your real estate needs, you can connect with me at bostonconnect.com or 781-826-8000. Now, sit back, relax, take good notes, and let's talk real estate. And good morning to all my South Shore neighbors. This is Sharon McNamara. You are, of course, listening to Talk Real Estate Roundtable here on Saturday morning, Memorial Day weekend, Saturday, May 24th. Yeah. That was good for that without looking at my calendar. You heard that other voice. Yes, that is Melissa Wallace. She is the Director of Operations and Agent Relations here at Boston Connect Real Estate. We are in our home office this morning. We are live. I believe we have Tim in studio. Good morning, Tim.
You believe correctly. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Sharon, a little share there.
Yeah.
Do you believe in love after love?
I love Cher. I saw Cher in concert.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, back in the day. I've seen her a couple times.
Yeah, I was going to say back in the day. We saw her a couple years ago.
Yeah, but I saw her back in the day.
Yeah,
like back
in her prime.
In Worcester. Yeah. So, yeah, I saw her. Yeah. I won't get into what happened that night. But anyway.
My girlfriend tuned for next show, folks. Got some juicy tea or something.
Keeping it real.
Keeping it real. Yep. Let's just say, well, someone stole Karen's pocketbook. I was with Karen, my best friend, Kim and Karen. Someone stole her pocketbook, and then she ended up beating him up. So, hey.
And then Cher came over and went, snap out of it.
Snap out of it. Snap out of it. My favorite scene from Moonstruck, filmed right here in Cohasset, by the way. So good morning to all of our South Shore neighbors. Again, you're listening to Talk Real Estate Roundtable. We are streaming everywhere. We are live on YouTube, live on Instagram. We're live on Facebook. We're just about everywhere.
We're everywhere. You can't get away from us.
I know. You can run, but you cannot hide. You cannot hide. So I started this new thing too. So I'm gonna try. I mean, that's the goal after every show is go back and do an Instagram sort of reel. In the next few days, right? So like I'll film little tidbits and tips, like the top tips. I did one a couple weeks ago, and I was working with somebody who does editing. So she finished up all the editing, and we got the first one out. So now the template is done, and we'll be able to get those out. So if you don't want to listen to us, listen to us on WATD for sure. Like you definitely want to do that. But if you don't have time to go back and watch us on YouTube and all those other channels that we use for social media, then this is like a quick way to get just some top tips.
Top tips from our show.
Yeah. And you thought that I boosted it, and I didn't.
Yeah. Well, I kept seeing it as an ad on my personal, and I was like, whoa. She figured it out.
Yeah, barely. I got it up there, but like that's about it. So I usually don't fool around with all the Instagram stuff. That's your jam. So how's everything else? How's everything going?
Busy. Everyone's busy. It's so good to see. And not only did we have 6 new listings in the office last week, we had quite a few closings this week. So everyone's keeping me busy because they're busy. If they're busy, I'm busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I noticed that yesterday I was working on our newsletter. Yeah. I was sort of bored a little bit last night. So I don't know if you saw my redesign.
No, I just saw that it was still a draft because I was like, I didn't get the newsletter.
No. So I sent that out late last night, but anyways, I put in there a section about, all this, we had a few agents who had some solds this week and, some closings and a lot of under agreements and contingents. So it seems like the market is still very, very busy if homes are priced accurately, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. And we get our topics for the show from our everyday conversations with agents or with each other clients. So, this sort of topic that we're going to be talking about today definitely was a conversation that was brought up with one of our agents. And he's busy. So, he was sort of future forecasting and preparing for what's going to happen when I get multiple offers and how does that look, with unrepresented buyers and things like that. So, like I said, we get a lot of our topics for the show, like from our everyday life in real estate. So, we try to keep it interesting for everybody.
Yeah, and trying to keep it not only are some of our topics like last week you did with Kristen Howlett, full-time real estate agent here at Boston Connect Real Estate, keeping it hyper local. We're also keeping it very relative to what is going on in the market. And that's the thing is there's so many different places where people can go online. If they saw it on Google, it must be right. Type of mentality. But we're keeping sort of relative to what is going on in the market. Today's topic is going to be mastering Massachusetts agency and demystifying agency relationships. And we did talk about this several times last year as we were going through the NAR settlement that happened last August, and the different changes that we were going to see. And I still feel that there's some confusion out there, not only with real estate agents but with the consumer. And all of this was supposed to be put into place for the consumer. But I'm feeling that there are definitely some myths out there that aren't accurate. And I do believe that buyers, when they're out there looking for homes, whether they're going to open houses or going, calling to get a showing, that they don't fully understand what it means to call the listing agent.
I think the confusion with the consumer, at least, is they're getting their information from people who aren't in the industry and can't explain it. Or they are getting information from somebody who's in the industry who might not be doing it full time and hasn't been going to trainings and hasn't been, putting in the effort to learn the new ways of the land. So I think that is part of the confusion. It's one thing to see something on the news or hear something from your neighbor. But if they're not in it, it's like I wouldn't take medical advice from somebody who like doesn't even have a primary care.
You don't even have health insurance.
So we always say like stay in your lane type of thing, and not to be like so blunt about it, but it's like we're professionals in this industry for a reason. And every industry has professionals and then not so much, but you get to know who's who very quickly, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And too, like one of the things I want to say is, I am super proud of our agent. It was, by the way, it was Matt Mahoney. He's a full-time real estate agent here at Boston Connect Real Estate. He's been with us since he got his license right from the beginning. He is a great, wonderful agent. And one of the things I love the most about being the broker owner of Boston Connect Real Estate is I've gotten quite a few calls recently, which is an indicator to me. Well, I've had calls like when I was on vacation and stuff like that. Like I get calls from agents who really aren't sort of participating, and then suddenly they're going to have a listing or a buyer and they don't know what to do. But my most intriguing conversations are with our top producer agents. I mean, Matt has been our top producer single agent until Kristen bumped him out last year. They're on the fight bump right now. Yeah, those two. But to hear even the questioning, not even questioning, but just like, what is the best way for me to do this? I want to make sure that I'm protecting my seller. And I also want to, like, I don't feel comfortable, even though I can legally do dual agency in the state of Massachusetts. I don't feel comfortable with that. And sort of talking it through, it made me feel good as a broker to know that under this roof are agents who care about their clients, whether they're working directly with me and Mary or me and you, because you and I team up on things, or whether they're working with one of our agents who's here.
Yeah, I think that the struggle was, wanting to do the best that they possibly can representing their seller. And by there, I mean Matt representing his seller the best way, because that's what he was hired to do. And that's where his responsibility lies. And never did he want to cross that line where somebody who's unrepresented, putting in an offer or anything like that. It's like, well, I'm not representing anybody other than my client who hired me. And that's sort of the mindset that he went into it, which I think is a great mindset to have. I mean, not everybody is comfortable with dual agency, and we'll get into what that means later in the show. But he sort of was just like, no, this is how I work. This is, I work for the person who hires me.
Yep, absolutely. And it wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't about double siding it.
Yeah.
Quote, no one can see my air quotes other than the people watching me on social media. People saying in terms. And I think too, when you were talking about, taking advice from people outside of the industry who are doing this full time, and I go back to the importance of hiring a buyer's agent or a seller's agent who does this full time. And again, hey, I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I have been going through, what I went through for the last month, right? I was very, very clear for the first time in my 24-year career to you and Mary. It is not fair to my clients for me to pretend that I am even in this game a little bit. My full focus was on my father.
Yeah.
And it had to be, right? So like that to me is showing that I am a professional when I put my client first and always first, right? But when you were talking about that, it made me think of the people we take advice from is like really, really scrub that advice. Like, where is that person getting the information? Sometimes, if people talk to me about politics or whatever, like, hey, listen, I know a little bit, but like not enough to have a intelligent conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I hear people saying certain things, I always say, oh, where did you hear that? Like, how did you hear? Like, you didn't come up with that yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what were you watching? Were you watching CNN? Were you watching Fox? Were you watching MSNBC?
Yeah.
Like, where did you hear?
Oh, that's a case study. Well, you're like, I know that you can do a case study.
Yeah,
and no one that you know.
Yeah, you were not up on the hill.
You're fibbing.
You're not up on the hill there. You don't know. But that's how I feel about real estate as well. Is I heard this, and one of the biggest myths that we're going to sort of demystify when we're talking about agency relationships is if I go directly to the seller's agent. Now the general public doesn't use that term, by the way. They always say the listing agent.
Yeah.
Okay. When you say the listing agent, in your head, substitute seller's agent for listing agent. That was pretty good of me to just come up with that, really. I mean, I've always thought it in my head, but for the general public and for our listeners, if you say listing agent, make sure in your head in the state of Massachusetts, you're also saying seller's agent, which means that agent works for the seller.
Yeah.
And nobody else until you get into an agreement with that person. Okay. So again, you're listening to Talk Real Estate Roundtable here on WATD this morning. I have Melissa, my sidekick, here with me this morning. Of course, she's my director of operations and agent relations. And we have Tim McKinney is our producer today over in WATD. His phone number is 781-837-4900. You can call early. Don't wait until the last 2 minutes because we want to have a conversation with you.
And if you're shy, you can text it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Give the number again.
Just on that topic was you're not just getting into an agreement with the agent. That agent now has to go to their seller as well and get permission to represent you. So there's two folds to it. So you almost have to be like, okay, is it really that smart to have that representation from somebody who's also representing the other side? And again, we say it all the time. It's not two sides against each other. Where everyone has a common goal, and that is to get everybody to the closing table. So no, we're not, you're not referees in the fight, you know?
I hate that word, sides. I hate that word.
Yeah.
We recently had an election in Pembroke, and the candidate that I was supporting did not win. And, somebody in town was trying to like poke the bear, and I'm like Mama Bear in this scenario. And, like who won, pretending that he didn't know everything else. So I was out of town, and I was just like, my candidate didn't win. Sean Keegan won. Congratulations, Sean. I think that he will do a good job. I can't imagine that anyone would run for any type of office if they didn't think that they were going to win. That brought me onto the politics stage again.
Sides.
Sides. And and there was a lot of going back and forth on social media. And I was getting private texts and all this other stuff, and I said, please, maybe our world will get to a better place when we stop saying sides, because it isn't about sides. It's about the party that represents you and your thoughts the best, which is why I'm an independent, right? Like, because I like both sides.
Yeah.
Right? But I shouldn't say that word. I like both parties. I don't care if you're a donkey or an elephant. Anyways, but the sides. But that is a good analogy with, how to think about the real estate aspect of it. The seller's agent represents the seller. The buyer's agent represents the buyer. Can the seller's agent represent both? Yes. But as you just said, they both have to be in agreement of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both parties.
Both parties have to. Yeah, I like the word parties better. I mean, come on.
Sounds more fun.
Yeah, like it's a party, right? I don't think anybody meant it to be sides. And I think, is that the reason why the world is the way it is? Because everybody sees everything as sides. Red Sox and Yankees. Who's your party?
Yeah. I
Who's
mean,
your team?
I feel like people who
Who's your team though, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be that? Who's your team? Do you like the Cowboys? Do you like the Patriots?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, as a listing agent, like, it gets muddy water when you're representing both parties, because you have to give recommendations for if they're doing a home inspection, and so home inspectors or anything like that. So I don't know. I just don't know how people do it.
I know.
I mean, I understand when there's two people like you and Mary.
Yeah.
You're able to separate that way, with the Grady team. So Tracy Grady, who's a full-time realtor here at Boston Connect Real Estate, with her husband. She comes on the show a lot. There's two of them. Trish and Nick Flynn, the Flynn team, they called me the other day and said, even us, like I don't know, there's two of us and we still have so much, going on. So I was going to help them, with the home inspection. So, it's a lot.
It is.
I could imagine it being a lot for one person.
So again, that phone number, 781-837-4900. You can either text Tim or call Tim, and then he will pipe you through to us. So if you have any questions or comments about this topic, again, it's Mastering Massachusetts Agency and Demystifying Agency Relationships, or you can just text him at that same number, 781-837-4900. We'd love to make the show interactive, so we hope that you will call. So the first part of it is the importance of mandatory licensing, the relationship disclosure. I'll talk a little bit about the settlement that happened last year. So that is sort of recent, and how agency and the regulatory updates affect buyers, sellers, and agents. So the first part of this is the mandatory agency disclosure explained. And one of the things that you should know, whether you are listing a home or whether you are buying a home, is that it is a requirement in the state of Massachusetts to this is whether or not you are a realtor or not.
Or a salesperson.
Yes, you are a real estate agent for the state of Massachusetts. Every single agent has to abide by the agency disclosure. It's a mandatory disclosure. And in that disclosure, it indicates and highlights very specifically the differences in all the agencies. So there's a seller's agent, represents the seller exclusively, owes individual loyalty to that person. I'm thinking of old car, right? Obedience. Buyer's agent exclusively represents the buyer, protects the buyer's interest. Facilitator is a non-agent. It assists both buyer and seller, but does not represent either exclusively.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine a world where that actually happens, but it's out there. Designated agency is when two agents within the same firm represent a buyer and seller separately, and that there has to be clear written consent required for that as well. And dual agency is a single agent that represents both the buyer and seller neutrally. Explicit written consent is required and limitations clearly explained.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit about what you were talking about is, can dual agency happen in the state of Massachusetts? Some states, no. Here, yes. That means I have the listing. If I'm already working with you as a buyer, I already have a buyer agency agreement with you. So there is a chance, if I get a listing and I am the seller's agent, that one of my buyer clients may be interested. I already have an exclusive buyer agency agreement with that person, right? seller needs to understand and recognize that anything that I know about that buyer that's personal, confidential, or financial always stays with me. I cannot share that information. So the seller has to be okay with that.
Yeah.
The buyer has to be okay with knowing that anything I know about the seller that's personal, confidential, or financial about the seller, I cannot share with them. I personally do not have a problem doing dual agency because I can have a clear delineation through the like a line in the sand of not telling the other one what. Where it gets hard and difficult, I would say, is more for the buyer. Because as a buyer's agent, I can't give you any advice on where your offer should lay.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's where Matt was struggling a bit too. Like, how do I help a person when I already know all these other things? If I have multiple offers, I know what all these other offers are. How do I possibly help a buyer?
Well, also, if you met that buyer through an open house or they called through, those third party sites and they happen to get you or they just called the office, just you don't already have that established relationship with them. So, and you working by, relationships and having all these relationships with your clients, it's sort of a switch to like not really, I would say, not have that same I don't want to say like love for each other. Like you already have that relationship with your seller because most likely they were referred to you or a past client. You might have helped them buy that house years ago and they're ready to move on to something else. But if somebody, calls you out of the blue and is unrepresented, you don't have that relationship with them.
No.
That's why I think it's interesting to know that there's buyers out there that have no relationship with an agent and sort of don't have any representation.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, especially first time home buyers, because it's like, how do you know the process?
And that's, I think, I don't even know if I fully completed that thought earlier when one of the biggest
complete your thought.
Yeah, one of the biggest myths that we want to demystify is if I go directly to the seller's agent, will I get a deal, quote unquote, or will they be able to, do something and reduce compensation in order for me to get my foot in the door, like so I can save some money. That's the other thing too is when and again, I didn't finish this thought when we were talking about, the people who you're getting your advice of. As you were saying it, all I can think of is like a dig me. That was like that was a phrase that one of the foremen that I used to work with used one time, and I never forgot it. And I was like, dig me, and he goes, yeah, hey, aren't you digging me? Like that type of person who thinks that they know how to negotiate, but like seriously, like you paid more than the sticker price for the car, my friend.
Yeah,
So don't take your advice from that person, but where is that information lying? There is certainly, and I had said this one time last year, there's certainly a blog or something out there that says go directly to the seller's agent or the listing agent, which is the same, and you can get a better deal because now they should be able to reduce their commission because they don't have to pay both. Guess what, friends? That world is gone.
Yeah. What the deal you're getting is not being represented.
Yeah.
That's the deal you're getting, whether it's a good one or not.
Don't we have a form for that, Melissa?
Yeah.
What's that called?
Yeah, I know, right? Unrepresented buyer.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, you also get, permission from a seller if they can, represent both sides. But what would be the benefit of a listing agent?
I don't see a benefit for the seller. I mean, well, it matters because we can have different type of compensation scales, that are within your listing agreement.
Yeah.
Those are legal. Like, hey, this is how much I'm going to charge you. And if a buyer comes directly to me, then it's going to be this much compensation based on the fact that you're doing the job of two people. And sometimes there is sort of a scale on that, if it's with the same agent in the same office, that maybe they are able to do things like that. But this is the thing, commission and compensation has always been negotiable. It has always been. But guess what? Negotiable means, and I've said this before, it can be negotiated on both sides.
Yeah.
So just if I sit down with somebody and they say, I want to do, another agent is willing to do it for this amount, will you? And I say no, it doesn't mean I'm not willing to negotiate with you. It just means that no, that I'm negotiating for myself as well, right?
As an independent contractor, you have that right to say, no, this
No.
is where I feel my value is. And you can set your value.
Yes.
And if somebody has a lower value, has said that their value might be lower, then
and that's
you get what you get what you get.
Yeah, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
Right. So, but as a buyer, so your tip on number 2 here is you definitely want to confirm your agent's exact role and responsibility to ensure your interests are represented appropriately and mutually. Because there are people who feel like, and I see this a lot in new construction where they think, oh, I'm just going to go directly to the listing agent on this and they'll be able to maybe get me more upgrades or this or that or the other thing. I mean, there's all these myths in people's heads. It's not my money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not playing with my money here. It's somebody else's money. I don't have a choice in that. But you just so you know, no, that doesn't necessarily happen when you go to the seller's agent directly. What you are is unrepresented. So maybe this other agent is saying to you, oh yeah, if you go directly to me, you'll have a better chance of getting this because there are multiple offers on it and I already have a relationship with the seller. So if you put your offer in directly with me, is that self-serving? Maybe. Right. For that agent, like, oh yeah, so maybe there is nothing that says that there'll be a discount and now this buyer's agent is potentially going to quote unquote get both sides.
Moving on to the next segment. So say somebody goes to an open house, they don't already have an established relationship or an agency agreement with somebody, and they want to put in an offer with the listing agent. What are some options that they have?
So it's interesting when somebody walks into an open house, and one of the first things I always say is, oh, could you tell me who your agent is? Oh, I'm not working with an agent. We're seeing less and less of that, though, with the changes in the NAR settlement. So NAR is the National Association of Realtors, and that those are not just real estate agents that work for the state of Massachusetts. So this is not a Massachusetts law. This is a NAR regulation. So if you are considered a realtor, then this is a regulation that comes from them. Do I agree in it? Absolutely, positively not. I don't think any association should be mingling and mixing into contract law. Okay. That's how I personally feel about that. However, we are a realtor office, so we have to abide by that regulation. That regulation is that every buyer that you are discussing any type of property with is signing an exclusive buyer agency agreement with everything is detailed. Now it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast the other day and I heard 2 people talking back and forth about this, exclusive buyer agency agreement. It is supposed to be written out very specifically how much you are charging that buyer to work for you, for you to work for them. They said, oh, we just leave that blank and then we figure it out after. So if the seller is going to compensate, because the seller still can compensate if they choose to right up front, but the seller's agent, their company can still compensate if they choose to. So we can get into some of the compensation stuff later. But I think, I don't even, where was I going with that? You were really looking at me like you were interested in this topic, so I got flustered.
Oh, I'm sorry for staring right into your soul.
Yeah, I know. So anyways, the compensation part of it, I guess, is what I was talking about. So when you walk in as an unrepresented buyer, oh, I know what I was saying. So the exclusive buyer agreement, it is supposed to be it's written in there very specifically how much you're charging your client, the buyer client, to work for you. When you get to putting in that offer, you are going to owe that person that much money, whether or not the seller is going to compensate you or the seller's agent is going to compensate you. This is why I feel we have a lot less sort of buyers that are sort of floating around. But I also think that buyers are getting into exclusive buyer agency agreements with buyer agents that, one, they don't know much about. They're calling some website, you know what I mean? All these companies online that aren't really companies, and they're just selling off leads. They're signing these documents. And guess what? That's a contract. Like, you're committing to this person potentially for 6 months.
Yeah.
So I feel like we don't have as many people sort of floating around, but I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, because I feel as if a lot of the buyer's agents aren't really fully working as full buyer's agents.
I would be interested to know if there are a lot of buyers out there in the market right now that don't have a buyer agency agreement because they don't fully understand it, so they'd rather not have one
Mm-hmm.
until like the final hour type of thing. Like they don't want to commit to somebody when they don't understand it.
I don't think that anybody should commit to somebody unless they fully understand it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why I would be interested to know, like, are like the buyers out there, if you're a buyer, like, do you understand this? Has somebody explained this to you?
Mm-hmm.
Or have you just been like, you know what, I don't even want to get involved in it right now. I'm just looking. So like, why do I have to commit to somebody?
Well, and that's sort of the problem. I also think why we have unrepresented buyers, because this regulation, again, it's not state regulated, so don't worry about that. But this NAR regulation is forcing buyers to go into contracts with people when they potentially don't fully understand what they're
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
signing.
Mm-hmm.
So what this actually means is, if, hey, I just want to look at the house. Like, why do I have to like pee in a cup and give a blood sample just
Yeah.
because I want to see this house?
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't need a DNA sample. And that's why, like, going to an open house as a buyer, if you don't have buyer agency representation, when you go into that house, here's a tip. Like, don't give away like your whole hand,
Yeah.
like, don't, and just go in and just say, I just started my search. Am I working with somebody? No, not at the time.
Yeah.
But you should, as a buyer, be interviewing people. We see our agents here, they have full buyer agency presentations.
Yeah.
We did a whole course on just buyer agency presentations that took us, 3 or 4 sessions to get through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody came to the table with them. And you did it as part of the young professionals too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
So, you shouldn't be signing any contract until you fully understand it, because if that buyer agent isn't representing you fully and you show up and you're at this open house and now you can't find your agent, or you don't know, like, are they really fully, oh yeah, I'm going to write an offer up for you, but just so you truly know, um, I'm a snowbird and I'm down in Naples right now. So, like, you just tell me if you like the house and I'll write up the offer.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't work. Like, you
Yeah.
have to go. The buyer's agent should be meeting you there. The buyer's agent should be bringing the house to you. You should be having that appointment. That just sort of went spiraling because it sort of irritates me so much.
Yeah.
Because I see buyers doing it all the time. And I understand that NAR thinks that this is protecting people, but I also feel like it's forcing people to do something that they're not fully understanding.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was like, I wonder how many buyers are out there that aren't represented, and I guess maybe how many agents out there are doing these unrepresented buyer agreements
Mm-hmm.
and sort of having both parties, not representing both parties, but having both
And
parties.
probably not so many.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that there aren't too many agents that are saying, "Okay, I'm glad that you're writing this offer up on me." And in their head, they might be saying, "Oh, I'm getting both parties," but they're probably saying sides, which drives me crazy. But
Yeah.
if anybody put in front of me, yeah, I'm happy to write up this offer as soon as you sign this unrepresented buyer document.
Yeah.
Just so we fully know you're unrepresented, my friend. Right?
Yeah.
Who would do that? Somebody who doesn't know.
Somebody who doesn't know.
Somebody who doesn't know. That's the point of this whole radio show here today.
Know before you go.
Yeah, exactly. So when you show up, take back to what you were asking me is, if you are a buyer, you do not have a you do not have a buyer's agent. You can go into the open house, you can look around freely, you can sign in. And if you decide you want to put an offer in on that, chances are you can't go as a facilitator,
Mhm.
right? Because the seller's agent already has an agreement and already is
Mhm.
contractually already a seller's agent. So then you could be, I want you to represent me. That when somebody comes to me and says, I want you to represent me as a buyer's agent, I know somebody who's either on the internet or understands the situation. And as the listing agent, seller's agent, I can make that decision. And actually, really not even up to me. It's up to the seller if they agree to the dual agency aspect of it. Right.
Yeah.
So you could do that. So you are being represented, but just keep in mind, if I heard the word on the street that this seller is getting divorced and they really want to get out of the house, I might know that without representing that seller.
Yeah.
I would tell you as a buyer's agent, if I was your buyer's agent, like, hey, word on the street is they're going through a divorce, so they really want to get this house behind them, because that's how things happen.
Well, sometimes like people will go through an open house and like a kid will be there and be like, oh, that's, my teacher, Mrs. So-and-so, and you're like, oh gosh.
Oh yeah.
That's why we also say like kind of take down some certain things where, that, especially if you're going through a difficult time or a difficult transition in your life and maybe you don't want that information out there, and you might be well known around if you work in town and live in town. So
oh yeah,
take a little bit of the personalization down.
Take some of that stuff out.
Take some of that
yeah. But if back to that point though, is if I know that information just because I know of that family, and if they didn't decide to hire me, then I could tell you I know. It would be my responsibility, my fiduciary responsibility to you as a buyer's agent. But when I am the seller's agent, anything I know I cannot share with you, and nor will I, no matter how much you bribe me. It's not going to happen.
Next scenario, I want to talk about if what happens when a buyer comes into your open house with a lot of interest and wants to talk to you, but they have an exclusive buyer agency agreement with somebody. They're already represented by somebody, but they want to chat with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. When I'm working as a buyer's agent, I always, Mary and I always are very, very clear with our clients. When you go into an open house, if we're not there accompanying with you, which we prefer to do, but we're also working on weekends ourselves. So sometimes that's difficult. Say nothing. Say nothing. Even if we're with you, okay. So that's what the advice we give to our buyers. Like when you go in there, say nothing. It is absolutely positively mind-blowing to me, the information that people will give me when I am a seller's agent and I'm sitting there doing an open house.
Yeah.
I can find out everything about these people without even asking questions. I don't even ask prompting questions. And sometimes I'm like,
sometimes they just start to throw up all their information.
And I understand emotions get involved in this whole process. And especially if you see a house that you really like and you're really, oh my gosh, I want to put an offer in on this.
Yeah.
And you're trying to sort of, I want to say like plead your case almost to the listing agent by, I don't have anything to sell.
Yeah.
My brother lives down the street. I really want this house. Like, I want to be on the same street with him. I would be willing to pay well over asking. Like, don't have those conversations, or I'm getting divorced and I want to keep my kids in the school system. And this, just don't give anything. When you're a buyer's agent, you just go in there and you just say, hey, I just started my search.
Yeah. It's interesting because two things. A story is I was visiting Mary at an open house at Jefferson. I think she was doing a commuter open house, and there was a couple there, and they kept looking at me, and they're like, you look so familiar. I think we met you before. And I was like, so I automatically thought that they saw me on the radio show, and they're like, no, we met you at an open house. Come to find out they had come to Copperwood, and I had met them a couple of times, but then they start going off, oh, we bought this, and then now we're thinking about downsizing. Those are their words. We use right sizing. Now we're doing this, and so I don't think they ended up moving forward within Jefferson, but it was interesting because you got their whole life story, like, and that was a couple years ago. So it's like, oh, we ended up buying this, and then we got this, and the grandkids, and this, and I'm just like, all right, well,
yeah,
good to see you. Good to see you.
So what do you think about the weather?
And you're represented by somebody else. Is that true?
Yeah, like where is that other person?
Yeah, but and then the other part was I would say, as somebody who has done open houses, I think that if somebody goes in and they have representation, the questions that should be asked by somebody is, the age of the roof, or anything specific to the house. Leave when are you accepting offers? What, like, anything to do with being that interested in wanting to put in an offer. Let your agent ask those questions, and not in front of everybody.
Yeah, because everybody else is listening to you. You have a great story about that, being in a house one time and you overheard the people talking. Yes. Remember?
Yes, that was one of Kristen Howlett's listings. Um, and she had gone to her open house and it was really busy. And there was a couple, I'm not eavesdropping, I'm just casually walking through the house, and people were very vocal. And the house was great. She ended up getting multiple offers on it, but there was one couple that sort of was tearing the house apart and being like, oh, well, I'm going to have to do this and I'm going to have to do this. And everybody else seemed so fine with it all. But then they ended up putting in an offer. But when I was there, I said, hey, to Kristen, I said, hey, I just want to let you know that, that agent and their clients sort of are tearing it apart and people can hear. So I want to have a conversation with him and be like, hey, do you mind, having a conversation outside? And then she said, a couple of days later, she's like, you're never going to believe it. They put in an offer like below asking and being like that. And I'm like, you know what?
And but that's the other thing too. Even if it was at full price, even if it was above full price, knowing that they were in the house ripping it apart, my obligation as a seller's agent to my seller would be, hey, I know that on paper this looks like a great offer, but just so you know, my office manager was in here walking around while I was here. I heard them saying this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
If we go under contract with them and get to home inspection, which again, we have to do a show on that soon because those laws are changing. Maybe we should do that next week. Keep in mind, this is probably going to be like if you show that you're difficult as you're walking through an open house, I assure you, as the seller's agent, the first thing I am going to say to my client is, hold on, because they're going to be cray-cray.
Well, they did. Well, I think that her clients were more interested in, like, they received an offer. Like, out of all of the offers that they got, that was the one offer that was below asking. Everybody was above asking. And I mean, this is during COVID when we saw sort of the craziness. So it was interesting to get an offer like that where, and she said,
they're probably still looking.
This is what, they're probably still looking.
Yeah, they probably are. But
now they're unrepresented.
Now they're unrepresented for sure. But the other thing too, so like if you have an agent and you go into a house and you see that this house has a lot of activity, and then you're listening to like that voice in your head or that Googleness in your head, wherever that blog is, or, your, hey, don't you dig me, friend saying you should work directly with the seller's agent because you'll have a better chance of getting this. Just so you know, that piece of paper that is the exclusive buyer agency agreement that you have with your buyer agent has nothing to do with me and my seller or me with you.
Yeah.
So if you want to come into this house and you want to write an offer with me, guess what? You still can.
Yeah.
Do I suggest it? No. Could you? Yes. Do you think is that going to give you any leverage? I say no. You may think so. You may think differently. I don't know. But the reason why I'm telling you, you have that agreement. If you then go and your offer gets accepted and you've written it with either, and again, you could have come to me at one of my listings and I could have said, you know what, I represent the seller. If you want me to write this offer, I am writing it as the seller's agent. That's ultimately what Matt ended up doing, right? Hey, I can write up other offers. I'm representing one buyer, but as a seller's agent here, tell me how much you want to pay. Tell me if you want a home inspection. Tell me this, tell me that, tell me this. I'll write up the offer. I represent the seller. So I can do that. The problem is once you get under agreement, if the person you have that exclusive buyer agency agreement finds out, they potentially can come back and sue you.
Yeah.
They're not suing me. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't have a contract with that buyer agent. Do I have an ethics, thing? Potentially, but like I didn't ask this person to come to me. This person came to me.
What about this scenario? I'm sure it happens a lot. New construction is, you meet with somebody a couple times. They come to your open houses. You've talked with them. They don't indicate that they are represented. Then all of a sudden, an agent shows up.
Yeah, those ones are fun. So that's procuring cause, right? And I sit on the grievance committee. Actually, I have to update some of my things that I have to do to sit again, but. As being on the grievance committee, we did see a lot of procuring cause. And with procuring cause, if you come to me and if I'm asking before we get there, by the way, are you working with a buyer's agent? If the answer is no, then I will meet you. If the answer is yes, then the answer is, could you please have your agent call me so we can, we can put our schedules together. We can plan, what is the word? We can coordinate our schedules in order to get you into the property. So as a listing agent, I'm never going to say, no, I'm not going to bring you into the house just because you're represented. But I'm surely not going to, like this weekend, it's Memorial Day weekend. And hey, Monday, hey, my buyer's agent is actually down the Cape this weekend, hanging out at the beach, and I really want to see your listing. Will you show me?
Yeah.
No. I know. I'm sorry. Like, I'm also doing something.
I would like to hang out at the beach.
Yeah, but like, you're not going to do somebody else's job. Like, you know what I mean? So, and then I would say, oh, if your agent isn't available, then your agent should have somebody filling in for them.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody should be filling in so you can still get into this house.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. If you do go, you are represented. You can go to the seller's agent. The seller's agent could you have multiple exclusive buyer agency agreements signed? Yeah, you could, but you're going to owe people money.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the truth of the matter. It's not a state law, so you're not going to get anybody arrested. Somebody might get their R taken away as a realtor, but that's never going to happen either.
Yeah.
So just keep it in mind.
Any other scenarios we can think of? Or what do we got? Who pays whom? Critical changes to MLS practices after NAR settlement.
Yeah.
You did a great job on this.
Oh, I did. Thank you. Yeah, I worked on this last night. It was fun. Who pays whom? So the previous compensation structure. So we talked about this so much, and you can listen to our past shows on our podcast, Talk Real Estate Roundtable. You can go to our website, bostonconnect.com, and find all of our past shows as well.
And our blogs.
Melissa's been working hard on the new website. It looks awesome. But who pays who? So the best way for me to explain to you how it is now is to explain to you how it was. Now, there are going to be people, there are going to be teachers, instructors in Massachusetts who are going to 100% disagree with what I have to say, but this is how I see it.
Yeah.
The way it was before is you're going to list your home. I'm going to charge you this percentage. Okay. I'm just going to use round numbers that don't make any sense. Okay. I'm going to charge you 10%. Seller agrees. I'm going to pay you 10%. In order for me to put your listing into MLS, the MLS rule says you have to cooperate with buyer's agents in order for you to put this listing in there. So what I say is, fine, I'm going to put the listing in MLS so it gets the most syndication and gets to the most eyes, so we get more buyers who are interested in your home. So hopefully we get the offer that you want that has the best terms, conditions, and sale price. I then say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the 10% that you're giving me, again, I'm just using very round, stupid numbers. The 10% that you're giving me, I'm going to give half of that to a buyer's agent. I have to give them something based on me being in there.
Based on my relationship with MLS.
Exactly. So that's how it all worked. Okay. The seller paid the listing brokerage paid the buyer's brokerage. Okay. Then came this lawsuit and everything changed. Now, somebody made it seem like the seller was paying the buyer's agent as well. Some instructors in Massachusetts still see it that way. They say, well, it was the buyer's money. And I say it was the buyer's money to purchase the home until they gave it to the seller. Now it's the seller's money. The house is closed. The seller owes me this percentage. So this is where my difference is. And whatever, that's how I feel about it. Now, it's different. Now I say, okay, we no longer have to cooperate in order to be in MLS. I don't have to cooperate with anybody in order to get your house syndicated through MLS. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to charge you 5. Okay. Again, I'm just using fake numbers here. I'm going to charge you 5%. The seller then pays me. I always say in my listing presentations, just so you are aware, you can fully expect, and it's probable that, and again, is this negotiable? Yeah, that percentage, that 5% is negotiable. If that's what I'm charging you to list your home, does it mean I have to agree to what you want? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because it's negotiable doesn't mean I have to agree to what you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the seller will, the buyer's agent will, I can't believe we only have 2 minutes left. The buyer's agent, when they write up an offer for the buyer, within the contract, it will state the buyer is requesting that the seller compensates the buyer's agent. That's one way that exclusive buyer agency agreement, how they can be compensated, okay, is through that document, okay? And the seller can say yes or no.
Yeah.
Right. And if the seller says no, which happened to one of our agents recently, if the seller says no, then the buyer is responsible to pay that agent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the agreement that you get into when you have that representation.
Exactly. So tip number 6 is clearly negotiate all the documentation and the buyer agent compensation. Number 7 was critical changes to MLS practices in the NAR settlement. I sort of talked about that, but make sure you discuss that and negotiate all compensation details with your agent. The pros and cons of working directly with a seller's agent. We discussed that throughout the show. And let me see the top 10 recap. I'm going to do this quick. Request and review the mandatory agency disclosure. Clearly define and confirm your agent's representation. Understand the risks if you're choosing to be unrepresented. Always disclose up front. Honor the exclusive buyer agency agreement. Explicitly negotiate and clarify. Proactively discuss compensation. Weigh the pros and cons carefully. Never assume agency representation. Maintain thorough documentation. I know we have lots of open houses. Where can people find them?
They can find them at bostonconnect.com or follow us on social media, Boston Connect Real Estate. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, that was a lot of info, but I will be doing my real estate recap reel. So make sure you keep your eyes out on Instagram, and we'll make sure that we get that out there for you. Bye, Tim. Have a great day.
Bye, you too.
Let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might